Good morning. I'm Don Devaney. I'm part of the APMMC, the Army Asia Pacific Military Medical Conference 15 in Hanoi, Vietnam.
Okay. And you can just feel free to look at me as opposed
Sure.
to looking at the camera.
I'll do it.
Okay. How's the conference going so far? Any feelings about this one in particular?
Thanks a lot. I've had some extraordinary feelings since I've arrived in Vietnam, especially it's in May of 2005, 40 years to the day nearly when I first arrived in 1965, serving with the U.S. Army during the previous condition that we called the Vietnam War. So it's a homecoming in a way, but I felt particularly honored just to be selected to be the Force Protection Coordinator for the important APMMC 15. I hadn't been on previous ones. Kevin, the deputy, had, and he's experienced. So for me, it was a learning procedure, and I was able to bond quickly with those counterparts from the Ministry of Defense and the Vietnam Army that were assigned to assist and actually teach us the lay of the land. And there was a myriad of details to accomplish, but the spirit of cooperation is unprecedented, and especially with the Secretariat that consists of Vietnamese military members and the United States military members going day and night, doing a myriad of details, getting to know one another, dining together and living together and seeing the city. So it's been a tremendously uplifting experience.
You've been to Vietnam before, obviously, and it's a totally different it's a different time. It's a different place. Yeah, I hate to use the word surreal, but is there any kind of that going on? I mean, like, I've been always fascinated with Vietnam, and I told you earlier, listening to your thing was very interesting to me, because I really enjoyed your perspective and your knowledge of Vietnam, and I can only imagine being in your shoes, what it's like, you know.
The opportunity participating in this conference does bring somewhat a feeling of closure from a personal standpoint, but the greatness about serving in our Army, whether you're a military member or a civilian employee, is that you look forward. And coming to Vietnam after 40 years and not dwelling on the past, being curious of what occurred, and seeing the scope and nature of how the country seems to be hustle and bustle and just bursting with energy, yet you're in a city that reminds me somewhat of the French Quarter in New Orleans. It's got a lot of culture. Churches here, thousands of people attend religious services. I was quite surprised to see the market economy, the openness at Vietnam, and also the warm welcome and the embracing of Americans in particular. So that was terrific. Personally, visiting some of the places that I had been was something I wanted to do and will be able to do. And I'm going to start that off by making a short trip to Dien Bien Phu, which in 1954 was the sad defeat of the French colonial army in this country. But it was the start of the U.S. involvement. So for some reason, I'm driven to do that.
Brian, I don't want to pause for a second.
Yeah.
Just light. What is that?
No, what?
The interruption? All right. This conference, I mean, you're here for a security standpoint, but can you observe a little bit, or maybe talk a little bit, maybe we should probably have some feelings about this. Do you think this is more significant because of the recent earthquake and tsunami in Southeast Asia? This is the first conference after that, and does it bring home anything as far as really emphasize global cooperation?
It does to me. First of all, every morning we're delivered the Hanoi News, English language newspaper, and it has a tremendous number of articles showing economic development and the rebuilding what I would call the new Vietnam. Coupled with that, the tragic tsunami that hit Sumatra and the areas in Thailand, devastating. We spent one day in Bangkok, and we have Thai delegations. But more importantly, we have people from Mauritius, we have people from all over the arena, Indonesia, and I've talked with these folks. And the fact that we're meeting with the umbrella of medical concerns and the discussions, not only of the common HIV problems and malaria problems, but other tragic events that resulted from calamities like that. So when I saw Center of Excellence people talking with counterparts from around the world, it really showed how an event such as this can demonstrate the willingness of the United States and Vietnam to step forward, to look beyond any particular strenuous or straining relations of the past, go forward. And I couldn't think of a better type of group of people to do that. And from walking around here, it's accomplishing that mission.
Great. You had been to, obviously, Vietnam before. Is this your first time to Hanoi, though?
First time north. In fact, my previous, I had 2 tours of duty. Both were in the Delta region of Vietnam. I did travel to other places. Da Nang was the northernmost I saw. I've been to other spots in the country, but mostly area of specialty was Can Tho, Binh Thuy, Ca Mau, Phu Quoc Island in the real south. Tremendously interested in the north. They have 4 seasons in the north. The south has a wet season and a dry season. So one country, it's probably almost as long as the United States West Coast, maybe even longer, but it's narrow. The climate on our visit, you couldn't ask it for better. It's got warm breezes in the evening, it's lakes in town. So yes, everything about coming to this region of the country being new naturally is an eye-opener. Yesterday we went to Ha Long Bay, for example. It's a cultural asset, natural beauty, and the amazing part was a 10-bus convoy going over expressways that you would find in the United States or find in Japan and these other countries that you would think are more developed. It shows that the infrastructure here is on the cusp of burgeoning, and they're focusing on many things. They're redeveloping communities in the countryside. The rice fields add to the national treasure of this country, and you have to see it. It's beyond comprehension to understand the real beauty. Other countries that I've been to in Asia, such as Japan, the urban development has replaced all those beautiful rice fields you used to see, but in Vietnam, it's an ideal, beautiful place from a natural beauty aspect, for sure.
How you feel about the walking around the dodging the scooters?
It's amazing that the 2-wheel vehicle and the scooter is the made mode of it. It's a people mover, and it's accepted. And it's really, if you look at it, it's kind of orchestrated, and the driving is not aggressive. You would think it's total chaotic, but it really isn't. And they now installing traffic lights throughout the city, and you can see that they're kind of adapting the standards that in most other countries have, crosswalks and whatnot. But the road net is supporting, like in Hanoi, 3 million people. You would have no place to park cars or anything else. So it is a interesting to compare that everybody's on mopeds, but they got the best cameras and the best TVs and the best flat screens and CD, you name it, they seem to have it. So they've really known how to blend what is essential and what's practical and affordable with the future. And I've noticed that quite a lot. And I've noticed the tremendous friendliness toward the foreign visitor, especially the American, in that I don't find them nagging you. They give you your little privacy, and then I've had the opportunity, maybe by a stroke of luck, went to a watch repair shop and met a person my age that had been involved. And once they know you, and I try to use the best remembrance of the language skill, and they have confidence that you're, okay in their eyes, they'll like to talk a little bit about the past. And it's been great to meet Mr. Zhu, who's quite a renowned local hero from that era, and we have been able to establish a good friendship, which I like that a lot.
Finally, what do you hope to leave, personally, what do you hope to leave with from here? Maybe that you didn't come with?
Well, you know, the opportunity to go, you have to keep foremost in your mind, this is a government mission, not a personal mission. Naturally, we're here doing the business of our government, and this is the opportunity best in my lifetime. And I have 51 years Army service, 30 in the active uniform and 21 in a civilian capacity. We always tell American personnel traveling abroad that you are ambassadors of goodwill. This is the first opportunity in a conference like this, we're dealing with nations from all over the Pacific, that we truly are ambassadors of goodwill, and I'm so impressed with that. Now, for example, when the Secretariat arrived a week before the conference opened, we were given workspace, and I noticed that we were right next door to the DPKK. That's the North Korean government had some type of program going right next to us, and so I was kind of interested because I've never knowingly met a North Korean in my life. One day I was coming down the elevator and I was wearing my flag pin, and the elevator stopped and this gentleman gets on and he had some pin that I didn't recognize. So I asked him what country he's from, and he said he's from Korea. So I shook his hand and I said, "You're the first man I ever met from North Korea. And I want you to know that the United States respects the Korean people, and that both nations should be working hard and are working hard toward peace." He smiled, and I felt I made a little bit of a friend with that particular guy, and I liked it a lot. So that's an example of how one person can be an ambassador of goodwill without going beyond what you're supposed to do and doing it the right way. And there's a million opportunities here to do it. You can do it with maids, you can do it with door people. So we have to avoid the impression that we're over here with a lot of dough. And in some ways I look at it, well, the Japanese recovered tremendously from World War II. They come to Hawaii and they golf. The ones that we see as tourists usually are well heeled compared to what the average American is. And I noticed as a dichotomy, the Japanese didn't win their war, but economically became a tremendous power. I always felt, and maybe it's a minority opinion, that the United States won the Vietnam War if you look at it in totality of the economic, military, and total participation of goals that we had. So I use that analogy in that we're here, we have a little more discretionary money than these poor people have. So we have to avoid doing those things that would be objectionable. So that means trying to secrete what you spend and not tip all over the place and not act like boorish behavior. And from what I've seen, we're doing that. So I'm taking away from the conference renewed hope for the bilateral relationships between our country and Vietnam. Proof that we can work with regimes such as that we see in China and still maintain a friendly, competitive economic business relationship. And I see a lot of similarity here. I think that we're looking beyond, and what we can partner with together is so I'm taking a lot of that home, and all the Vietnam friends that we have in Hawaii, for example, I can't wait to see them to tell them how their country seems to be on the right road.
That's great, Don. Thank you.
Was that a pretty good interview, Jim?
That's great. I really appreciate it.
Well, let's see how it goes.
I got tape. Why not?
Yeah. Okay, Jim. Well, another little impression is there's two vignettes I'd like to say, and you give me the opportunity. Next month, June, on the 17th, Tripler will be graduating the interns, and that's the new doctors. And in that, there's residents and there's fellows. Every year in June, they have a graduation. Every year, we ask a distinguished person to be the speaker at the commencement exercise. This year, retired Colonel Hal Kushner, Kushner, is going to be the guest speaker. He's an internet friend of mine because I know his life story intimately. Dr. Kushner was born at Tripler Army Hospital in 1941 when it was located at Fort Shafter. His dad was a colonel at the Army airfield called Hickam Field. The war began in December 41. Theoretically, Hal became a Pearl Harbor survivor. In 1966, Colonel Kushner returned to Tripler as a captain, Medical Corps, and he was with the intern class of 1967. In August of 67, he came to Vietnam and was assigned to the 1st Cav Division as a flight surgeon. In December of 67, on a mission with the 1st Cav as flight surgeon, the helicopter he was on came under hostile fire and was downed. Everybody on board that helicopter was killed with the exception of Dr. Kushner and the crew chief. The crew chief was burned, had a broken leg. Dr. Kushner splintered the guy's leg, carried him across the rice field, but unfortunately, the second day the Viet Cong captured both of them. The sergeant died maybe 2 days later, and Dr. Kushner became a prisoner of war. This was in the Central Highlands. They marched him on foot 975 kilometers to Vinh, which is a city south of Hanoi. And then he came to Hanoi on a cattle car and spent his first incarceration at the Citadel, which is near here. Then he transferred to what is known then as the Hanoi Hilton, the Hoa Lo prison. He spent 7 years as a prisoner of war. Now, then he returned, and when he returned to Hawaii with the group of repatriated prisoners and they landed at Hickam, first thing he did was kiss the ground, and he led the crew and the prisoners in singing God Bless America. He's a real patriot. And so we're so fortunate because we have our military people deployed to Afghanistan, to Iraq, and other hot spots, to have a person like Hal Kushner coming in next month, which I'm co-hosting with Colonel Berg. I say that in that I went to Hoa Lo and I tried to, trace some of the steps under much different circumstances, and so naturally I'm quite anxious to see him. And then we get to the aspect, well, how do you feel personally? Or I think, well, how does Hal Kushner feel personally? And you never really quite understand your emotions. I mean, yes, an old timer like me, I can represent a lot of the veteran groups, the 57,000 that never made it home. I'm thinking of them from time to time. But then I go to my child, brought up in Rhode Island, Boston Red Sox fan from day one. They never really won the World Series in my lifetime until last year. And we always seem to lose in the last day to the New York Yankees. So naturally, in that rivalry, most of us kids that were Red Sox fans, we hated the Yankees. Anything that happened bad to them was good as far as we were concerned. But I did notice all my life, when the Yankees made it to the World Series, I had respect for them, and I always was on their side. So using that is an example of how your emotions can play trick with you, in that you might have thought at one time, I would hate coming up to Hanoi and everything it stands for, but eventually you get beyond that. And so I use that little way of comparing how old Don is thinking, well, I'm a Red Sox fan, I'm in the town, and we're going for beating the Yankees all the time, but we have to live with the Yankees, and we surely have to live with the folks that are in charge here now.
Thank you so much.